After playing more than 3 hours of Assassin's Creed Valhalla and interviewing 2 developers on the game, I came away with a really good idea of what Valhalla has to offer. And I'm happy to say, as a fan of the series, I was extremely impressed. Today you'll hear my honest opinions from the experience, the positives and the negatives. Heads up, I'm about to upload a lot of Valhalla content, but I have certain restrictions, which means more videos that are shorter in length. I'll be uploading my interviews with Darby McDevitt and Jessica Maher, along with everything you need to know videos about the specifics, covering combat, stealth, exploration, story, longships, side quests, skills, and more. All of this stuff will come out over the next few days, so if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to my channel and click the bell so you don't miss anything. Here's what I got to play of Valhalla. Chapter 4 of the story, The Tale of Thane Oswald. It's the second half of the East Anglia story arc. I had a small cutscene at the beginning that caught me up to speed. This included 3 story missions, and I was able to play them from start to finish. In terms of open world content, I could do it in any order I wanted to. It was just like it would be in the real game. I'm pretty sure it was restricted just to the East Anglia region. That included multiple villages and towns with people I could talk to, and more remote areas with activities to discover. What I didn't play is some of the open world activities that I just didn't have time for: parkour puzzles, animus anomalies, and some boss fights. One of the biggest topics in the conversation leading up to Valhalla has been, how similar is this game going to be to Origins and Odyssey? And I'm happy to say that Valhalla is not a copy-paste of either of those games. That's just a generalization. There are a lot of surface level comparisons. Abilities look similar, the inventory screen is similar, camera angle is about the same. Of course, Valhalla reminds me of those games. It feels familiar, like you'd expect from a sequel. Valhalla builds off of systems introduced in those games. Combat has more depth, exploration is natural, and movement feels heavier and more realistic. It also addresses things I didn't like. For example, you can't spam attacks anymore in combat. Questing doesn't overwhelm you with a huge list of objectives, and it doesn't feel like your character is skating over a thin layer of ice 24/7. If you liked Origins and Odyssey, I think odds are you're going to like Valhalla. But if you didn't like them, the overall experience to me felt different enough for there to be a chance that you may like Valhalla. If you were expecting Valhalla to be a major departure from Origins and Odyssey, or to be more like Unity, one of the older games, I think you're going to be disappointed. It's still the same engine, they're building off of it, but it feels like more of a refinement of those games. So what kind of game is Valhalla? While there is an attempt to bring back some elements from the old games, make no mistake, this is an RPG. In the same vein of The Witcher or Dragon Age, there's choices, skills, loot, customization, tons of quests, all of that is in this game. A big concern I had going in is how realistic, how grounded is the game actually going to be, because Origins introduced some mystical elements while Odyssey took those ideas and ran with them in a way that kind of turned me off. From what I played, Valhalla is definitely more grounded than Odyssey. Some of the abilities feel ridiculous. There are bosses with huge health pools. There are flaming swords. It's tough to say if it's more or less realistic than Origins, but from my experience, it's similar. So, does Valhalla feel like an Assassin's Creed game? And by that, I mean more than Origins or Odyssey. Does it give off that assassin fantasy that we had before the soft reboot? From the time I had with the game, in some ways, I felt it did, and in others, I thought it could have done better. We know that Eivor aligns with the assassins at some point early on. In the demo, I already had the hidden blade, so that already happened. It was clear to me that we're not just playing as a Viking, we're playing as an assassin. And there was no reason for me to think that Eivor or the Vikings couldn't be part of that overall conflict. But at the same time, there was no Templar enemy we were chasing. And I assume they didn't want to give that away because it's a major plot point. In terms of gameplay, the biggest way Valhalla gave off the assassin vibe is through stealth. With the click of a button, I was able to pull my hood on or off, which reduces detection range. With it, I was able to take out multiple enemies with the hidden blade before getting detected. The leaping assassinate animations from above or a distance felt great, but I was disappointed by this quick slash animation at their legs. It didn't feel as satisfying as it could have, plus the hidden blade sound effect needed to be louder. Like we were told, you are able to one-shot assassinate tougher enemies with the hidden blade through an ability ability called Advanced Assassination. I used it multiple times, and I even had an opportunity to one-shot a boss, but I failed the QuickTime event, so I didn't pull it off. It is true that this is just a QuickTime event, and I was aware of that, but considering this is an RPG, it felt like a fair compromise to me. The ability to take out anyone instantly did make me feel like an assassin, and I was really happy to see that. I didn't see any form of social stealth or blending with crowds. No notoriety system either. I asked Jessica about this, and she said there are social stealth mechanics that will come into play in certain areas. My best guess is that crowd blending will return in hostile towns and villages, perhaps only in restricted areas. I know this is just a rumor, but I also couldn't cover myself with mud or snow in order to conceal my identity. Whether these mechanics were not ready or I just didn't have the opportunity in this area of the game, I was disappointed I didn't get to see them. I really hope social stealth plays a factor in this game because it makes all the difference. Parkour is such an important part of the assassin fantasy. Unfortunately, I didn't get to explore much of it because there were so few opportunities to climb that I barely even did. When I did climb, it felt almost identical to Origins and Odyssey. You hold down a button and steer your character up whatever structure you're climbing. Like those games, it feels intuitive, but at the cost of not being all that engaging or challenging to do. I asked Jessica about this, and she told me that there will be plenty of opportunities for complex parkour in certain locations. Like we were told, the environment dictates the amount of parkour we'll be doing. Reality is, Dark Ages England is relatively flat. There will be opportunities in places like towns, villages, and towers, but not a ton outside of that. If you're an old school fan who wanted to see a Unity style system, this might disappoint you. It's entirely possible that I missed something that is explained through a tutorial, some kind of advancement in the parkour, but to me, it felt most like the last few games. In my very limited time with the game, it felt like a mixed bag in terms of the assassin fantasy. It felt like I didn't see enough to tell you definitively that it won't feel like an Assassin's Creed game, but some elements I saw were exciting to me, and I did feel the fantasy of playing as an assassin. And because I know some of you will ask, no, you can't use the hidden blade in regular combat, only for assassinations. Everything we were told about Viking combat in this game is true. It does feel crunchy, weighty, and brutal. You can feel the impact of weapons, from the quick successive flail strikes to the heavy two-handed Dane axe chops. Blood spills generously, heads get lopped off like slices of bread. Now, almost every time you kill an enemy, you get a zoomed-in finisher move. A combination of the animation, the controller feedback, and the brutality that you see makes combat feel satisfying to me. It also feels slower and more deliberate thanks to one big addition: the stamina meter. You're not able to spam dodge or turtle up with a shield. In the beginning, enemies destroyed me quickly because I wasn't used to this constraint. I was running out of stamina, and this in and of itself adds a layer of depth. The weapon system impressed me the most. Each individual piece is named, unique, and not a random loot roll. You won't find a billion different weapons with slight statistical differences. In my playthrough, I found the spinning death, a flail that felt much different than the one-handed axe I'd been using up to that point, and neither of those weapons felt like the two-handed spear that I used earlier. The combos, the timing, the tactics depended on which weapon I was using. What really blew me away was how equipping weapons changed their mechanics. We're given a main hand slot and an offhand slot, and where you put each weapon matters. For example, I put a shield in my main hand and a flail in my off, and the result is that my primary attacks and heavy attacks were shield-based combos, and the button I used to parry now controlled my flail. Swapping to the flail in main and the shield in off gave me completely different combos. In the demo, I saw 3 one-handed and 2 two-handed weapon types, each with their own unique movesets. But technically, because of the equipping system, there were 6 different ways to equip the one-handers to produce unique combos. At first, abilities seemed goofy. The Kick of Tyr is very similar to the Spartan Kick from Odyssey. Throwing Axe Fury came off feeling unrealistic. But the more I played, the more I realized how well these abilities gel with the combat finishers I was seeing all the time. It felt cohesive because all of those big, flashy, magical particle effects are gone in Valhalla. It doesn't feel like Eivor has magical powers. I just felt really strong and really skilled at throwing axes. This is another reason that overall combat felt more grounded to me. But there were still elements that brought me out of the immersion. Poison looks like you're splashing toilet water onto enemies, and Rued's flaming sword is just that, a freaking flaming sword. There's also this jumping ability called Dive of the Valkyries that felt a bit over the top. But those were my only gripes in terms of unrealistic combat. Ranged gameplay feels mostly the same as it was before. The way bows handle, the archetypes, and the abilities. I can't say I was the biggest fan of bows in Origins or Odyssey, so I didn't love it in Valhalla. I did find a few locked skills that might make it more fun for me this time around, but I didn't get to try them. Another thing that disappointed me was the lack of tools. There is a tool wheel, which is nice, but it's mostly used for things like torches and calling your longship. When I heard there was going to be a tool wheel, it brought me back to the days of the old games where you could use rope darts and throw bombs. In recent games, tools have been functionally replaced by abilities and skills. We have a ton of those in this game, but I'm holding on to hope that tools exist too, and they just weren't ready to show in the demo. Exploration in Odyssey and Origins felt overwhelming to me, like a sensory overload. There's so many icons on the map and crowding the HUD. Everything is tracked, every objective, every marker. You can say goodbye to that in Valhalla because the way it approaches exploration, quests, and activities felt so refreshing. Darby explains it best.
The idea of just vacuuming up side quests is gone. What we have instead are tons and tons of little world events, like the little girl who has the horse. We don't put those in your quest log because it doesn't make sense that Eivor would go, oh, remember to help this girl. We want you to help the girl if you feel like helping the girl. So so this is what I mean by side quests. There's still tons of this narrative content, but we changed it so it's up to you to be interested in it. We will track the things that Eivor is interested in, but the world is filled with all kinds of other things that we want you to be interested in.
Only primary quest arcs are tracked in your quest log. Every other activity is represented by a little blip on your map. Gold represents wealth, things like new weapons and skills or rare resources. Blue represents mysteries, side quests, or puzzles and hidden tombs. And white is secrets, chests behind locked doors that require you to move debris or find a key. While I do know how many activities there are and what type, I don't know where they are and what they'll ask me to do. Like Darby said, I thought this approach was a game changer. I had to go out and uncover these activities for myself, and that in and of itself felt rewarding. For example, instead of giving me a raid icon on a location 500 meters away telling me, hey, idiot, you can raid this, it gives me a gold blip. It's true, after so many hours I may recognize that gold is only one of three things: a monastery I can raid, an abandoned farmhouse with a chest, or a tower filled with rogue Vikings. But what I'm banking on is that the variety and the process of feeling like I discovered it for myself is going to pay off, and I hope Valhalla delivers on that. Valhalla feels more like the sandbox experience that I want out of my open world games. It relies less on the HUD and the UI to drive exploration and asks you to figure out things for yourself, which is something I appreciate from game design. I really enjoyed the side quest activities that I found. Some were narrative driven, like stumbling upon one of Ragnar Lothbrok's warriors who asked me to defeat him in battle so I could send him to Valhalla. Others relied on my ability to explore, like crashing through a boarded up well to find the key to unlock a house with a chest inside. What stood out to me were the notes littered around every single location. There's some sort of narrative context added to every place I visited, which was so nice to see. In terms of mini games, I got to play a drinking game and drunken archery during a story sequence. Both of these were super fun. I also tried fishing, which was fine too. I'll come out and say that it's genuinely hard to get attached to a story in a demo. I played a 3-hour vertical slice that capped off a story arc that I didn't even get to see the previous events for. There was a story recap, but there's so much context that I just didn't have. Not to mention, there there was no settlement gameplay in the demo at all. But the plot points were compelling enough to keep me interested. First, I recruited a local village to my cause. They were attacked by a common enemy, the Dane Viking clan led by Rued. I offered to retake their land in exchange for their support. Once they were recruited, I mounted an assault on Rued's fortress. Mechanically, it's similar to assaulting fortresses in Middle-earth Shadow of War. Lots of different ways to progress forward. With a bit of polishing, I can see this being a standout mode. After crashing through the final gate, it's revealed that the Saxon we supported for King of East Anglia is actually alive. This isn't a big payoff because I had no context, but Eivor seems genuinely surprised and happy. I defeated Rued one-on-one, and then came the first big choice. I had to choose between sparing or killing him. Oswald, the Saxon that we saved, appealed to his Christian values, asking me to spare Rued, and since he's my king, I agreed with him. Rued was genuinely angry that I didn't kill him, and when I pointed this out to Darby, he confirmed that it was because Rued wanted to die in battle. There's a certain sense of honor in Viking culture that we learn over the course of the narrative before this point. And because of that, Darby suggested that my decision might turn a few heads. Even without the context, I appreciated the depth of this decision. Later on, I got to see the wedding between Oswald and Valdis, creating a formal alliance between Saxons and Vikings. Rued shows up out of nowhere and murders a wedding guest, because once again, I spared him. And then when he challenged Oswald to battle, I stepped in as his challenger because I didn't want my king to die. Darby wouldn't confirm or deny whether Oswald could have actually died, but the mere possibility was fascinating to me. Throughout the quest, we're helped by a Viking named Fenrir. He's not an official member of our clan, but by the end of the arc, I was able to recruit him. Darby told me that once I recruited him, he would be on my longship, and I would see him in my settlement throughout the rest of the story. But he also said that it's entirely possible to make decisions where Fenrir is unable to join my clan. Simply put, there's a level of variability with choices that excited me, and they seemed genuine rather than being contrived or shoehorned for the sake of choice. In my time with the demo, facial animations and cutscenes were a mixed bag. Some felt great, while others not so much. Textures often didn't fully load. This wasn't a Mass Effect Andromeda situation where they were fundamentally broken. These felt unfinished, like something that should be cleaned up and fixed before launch. That being said, cinematics overall felt either on par or better than they did in Odyssey. My overall impression of our protagonist, Eivor, is that I really liked him. I played the male DNA stream for most of the time, and I found Magnus Brune's performance compelling. Eivor reminds me a lot of Edward. He's a guy you'd want to grab a beer with, or in this case, a mead with. I also noticed the voice acting. The dialogue felt very much like a Darby game, rooted to the setting and history, how these characters actually would have communicated. There's lots of colloquialisms and references to Norse mythology, and there's random conversations happening as you're riding through villages. It reminded me a lot of The Witcher 3 in that way. Valhalla is still very much an RPG like its reboot predecessors, and nothing confirms that more than the skill system. Earning experience nets you skill points to spend in what Ubisoft has called a skill graph. It functions more like a spider web, branching off in different directions in the form of constellations. Each little star in the constellation is called a node, and it costs 1 skill point to unlock. These grant passive stat upgrades, like boosting your health or buffing headshot damage. The bigger stars are main skills. To be clear, these are completely separate from the abilities like the Kick of Tyr that cost adrenaline to use. These are contextual moves you can perform, and the more you have, the more versatile gameplay feels. These main skills are divided by archetypes. Yellow represents the Raven, which gives stealth skills like one-shot assassinations. Red is for bear skills, which give the loud in-combat abilities like stomping downed enemies. Blue seems to be a balance of both, mixing bow and reflex-related skills. Every single star that you unlock adds to your global power, which is basically what replaces the leveling system. The higher your power, the higher your base stats and ability to fight tougher enemies. Each region of the game is divided by a suggested power level, so it's essentially the same as Origins and Odyssey in the way that the game steers you through certain areas before you're able to tackle others. Overall, I found the system a bit intimidating. It wasn't something I fully understood until after my time with the demo. I'm sure it'll be easier to grasp after more experience with it. Weapons and armor have been completely overhauled in terms of stats. Where Odyssey and Origins revolved around DPS or armor numbers with a set of random bonuses, Valhalla gives you more traditional values to work with. Weapons have speed, attack, impact, and crit chance. Armor pieces have an armor number, evasion, and weight. I couldn't tell you how much these numbers actually impacted gameplay, but it's a noticeable enough difference that makes the min-maxing part of the RPG element feel fundamentally different for me. There's this very conspicuous empty space beneath each item, and my guess is this is where a rune system will come into play. We're going to apply runes that add special effects to items. In the demo, there were no craftsmen or blacksmiths or opportunities to explore anything like this, so consider that speculation at this point. The item tier or rarity system also got a facelift. Instead of the item color dictating rarity, the text beneath each item tells you what tier it belongs to. Tiers range from fine to refined, superior, flawless, and mythical. Again, it wasn't clear how these tiers benefited the strength of weapons and armor, but you'll have to find special materials in order to progress each item to the next tier. Upgrades function pretty much the same as Origins and Odyssey. You exchange certain materials for a slight stat boost. There are 10 levels within each tier of rarity for the items. I did get to use this system, and when I upgraded my weapons for a boss fight, it felt like it pushed me over the edge. There's another layer that I noticed. Each armor and weapon piece belongs to one of the 3 archetypes: Raven, Bear, or Wolf. The more bear nodes you pick in the skill tree, the higher your bear power, which gives a blanket boost to all of your bear gear. While I didn't really feel the effects of this system, the idea is more attractive to me than seeing plus 12% hunter damage on a piece of gear. I didn't spend a whole lot of time in the Drakkar, but when I was in it, I enjoyed every second. Mechanically, it is identical to previous games. You're able to open the sails to gain speed and maneuver across the rivers of England. There's this animation where your crew breaks down the mast so you can pass underneath bridges, which was so unexpected that my jaw dropped the first time I saw it. The utility of the longship is what makes it feel particularly special to me. The fact that I could take my Vikings to raid locations along the river seamlessly felt satisfying. There's no ship combat, but there is a scripted sequence on the castle assault where you're forced to brace for cover. I'm disappointed there won't be ship combat, but then again, there was never a moment where it felt appropriate because there were no enemy ships to fight. Also, there are sea shanties. Well, they're not called sea shanties, but your crew will sing like they do in Black Flag, Rogue, and Odyssey. There's nothing better than sailing around listening to your clanmates sing Viking songs. Also, they tell stories. You get to hear the sagas and myths referenced throughout Valhalla passed on through oral tradition like they did in actual history. It's such a cool effect, and it makes me beyond excited to spend hours sailing around the English countryside. I wanted to mention the horse because I didn't love the way mounts felt in Origins or Odyssey. They felt stiff and lifeless. Eivor's horse felt so much better in the demo. The animations were more natural, and there's actually horse stamina this time around, so there's an element of realism there too. I didn't get to see any present day gameplay, not even a reference to Layla or her mission. Darby told me that I missed it because there are what they call animus anomalies. This is the mysterious modern day gameplay he was referencing, something he'd been wanting to do for years but couldn't quite pull off until now. I'll let him describe it.
So what we did was we found a way to bring the present day into the simulation. What if there was a way to just say, you're playing as Eivor, and then boom, you stop, and now you're Layla, and you keep going, and you do lots of cool present day stuff within the simulation space itself, and modern day stuff comes to you. So you're using the same or some of the same skills and abilities and affordances you have as Eivor as Layla, and that makes the transition smooth. It means that there's no hitch or hiccup, and it means that even people who aren't interested in the modern day are suddenly like captivated by this new thing they get to do, and it hasn't been a bump in the road whatsoever.
So to hear that modern day has been addressed in a way that doesn't yank you out of the experience in the Animus was truly exciting for me. One of the first things I did in the demo was check out the menus, and I discovered that I could, on the fly, switch between male and female Eivor. I asked Darby about this too, and he said it's not just a surface level thing. You can do that whenever you want. That's a feature. There's a meaning and a reason, something we'll discover as we play. We won't know immediately. It'll be a mystery that carries throughout throughout the game. He also said at any time we can leave the Animus and go to the present day. So not only are we not being yanked out at certain intervals throughout the story, we can freely leave and control Layla on command. This is not something we've been able to do since Black Flag, so I'm extremely excited to see what that looks like. All of this makes me confident in the fact that the Animus and present day are more important than they have been, and I hope they've been given the time and attention to make me care about them again. And there you have it, my honest opinion after playing 3 hours of Valhalla. This is coming from the perspective of someone who really loves this series, and I found myself buying what Ubisoft is selling me with Valhalla. It addresses areas I didn't love from Origins and Odyssey and adds new elements that I found compelling. Overall, I came away feeling extremely excited to play the full game. Once again, I'm going to be posting a ton of Valhalla gameplay over the next few days, so make sure you're subscribed to my channel and hit the bell to receive notifications when those videos go live. Big thanks to my patrons, Bill, Grass, Casey, John, Kamal, Patrick, Spyro, Tom, and Jackie for supporting me as a creator. I have a Patreon where you can support me further in exchange for exclusive updates and behind the scenes content. Check the link in the description below for more information. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in Valhalla.